The sagebrush sea covers millions of acres in the American West. It is often overlooked, yet the landscape is filled with secrets of the fascinating life that finds its home here. In this arid landscape, balance is delicate. Every drop of water must be used to perfection. Areas surrounding streams and rivers are hubs of life. The health of these riparian areas affects the entire ecosystem, from the creek beds to the uplands, where herds of pronghorn antelope roam, endangered sage grouse choose their mates, and migratory birds stop to nest each spring. Between the Rocky Mountains and Cascade Range, in the sagebrush of Southeast Oregon, sits Heart Mountain National Antelope Refuge, a landscape that holds a story with the potential to change the way we look at the entire American West. In the 1990s, ideas about the way public lands should be managed began to change. At Heart Mountain, that change came in the form of a new manager named Barry Reiswig.
When I first got here, I had no inkling of what was going to happen or how this was going to play itself out. I was told that we were probably going to do a new management plan for Heart Mountain. I was told that the place was a model of grazing and wildlife management, and I expected it to be a very positive, a very steady state type of management program that I would be running, and I had no idea that things were going to take the turn that they finally took.
Until European settlers arrived, pronghorn antelope were perfectly adapted to this landscape. When the North American cheetah was their top predator, evolution treated them well, and they became incredibly fast.
Pronghorn became fast because they have to outrun cheetah, then the cheetah go extinct, but we're left with this species that's so perfected for this environment. And they're the second or third fastest animal on the planet, and that's just pretty special. They're so fast, in fact, that when you're peeking out there at the break of dawn, and here comes some coyotes, and then here comes some pronghorn, and you're realizing the pronghorn don't even care that the coyotes are there because the adults don't have to be afraid of those coyotes.
But they couldn't outrun bullets from guns brought by colonists. After millions of years of successful evolution, just 50 years of hunting and habitat loss nearly eradicated the antelope.
North America had 12 to 13 million pronghorn at one time. And then by the early 30s, we think we were down to somewhere around 13,000 in the whole United States. They were becoming really quite rare.
Numbers continued to decline, and even the keenest observers didn't understand why.
So someone persuaded Franklin Roosevelt to try to set aside a place where this particular species could thrive.
It was a desperate attempt to save the species, and it worked. Despite being incredibly fast, pronghorn, it turns out, can't jump over fences. But on the open range of Heart Mountain, they could roam free. Designating the refuge in 1936 marked the beginning of their recovery. By the 1980s, pronghorn had rebounded to nearly 750,000 nationwide, but their numbers accounted for just 2% of their historical population, and the open range was now crisscrossed with cattle fencing. Around this time, keen observers began to take note of another, perhaps more challenging, land management issue.
These landscapes had been grazed going all the way back to beginning in the late 1800s and continuously grazed every year, basically. From that point forward, all the way through the creation of the refuges themselves in the mid-1930s.
When the native Paiutes were extirpated from the area, the new inhabitants brought with them a core value, the idea that livestock grazing could benefit the land and people. By the 1980s, however, it was time to reevaluate.
I grew up in a livestock family. I mean, my family raised livestock.
Barry's assignment was to evaluate the refuge grazing program and make any adjustments that would help guide the refuge towards its original mandate.
We hired a guy named Jim Yoakum who was the world's authority on antelope. First met Jim, sat down with him. I said, Jim, we're looking for coming up with the best grazing system management for antelope that exists. And he looked at me and he said, there isn't one. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, in my experience, grazing doesn't benefit antelope. And that was like, uh-oh. So that started me thinking, we may have a problem here. Is this thing being run the way the law says it's supposed to be run, as a refuge for antelope and other wildlife, which zeroes down to refuge for all wildlife?